On Friday, 12th October 2018, the Great Man of God, Prophet Robert Muwanguzi of Life Haven Christian Ministries, prophesied to the congregation about a country in the world that was going to mourn for their ex-president after collapsing. Witness the Great Man of God prophesying.
One, the countries in the mourning for the ex-president. I have seen the country. They are mourning for their ex-president. But mark all these words properly. Collapse. 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 That previous collapse.
The prophecy took only 247 days, and it came to pass on June 17, 2019, when the Egyptian ex-president Mohammad Morsi passed on after collapsing while in court. Mohammad Morsi was born August 20, 1951, in Al-Shakir Governorate, on the eastern side of the Nile Delta. He studied engineering at Cairo University, earning a bachelor's degree in 1975 and a master's degree in engineering metrology in 1978. He then traveled to the United States to continue with his education, earning a PhD in engineering from the University of Southern California in 1982. After receiving his doctorate, he taught engineering at California State University, Northridge until 1985. And during that time, he also worked for the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, NASA, on the development of engines for the Space Shuttle program. In 1985, he returned to Egypt and became a professor of engineering at Zagzig University, a position that he held until 2010. Morsi also became active in politics as a member of the Muslim Brotherhood, and in 2000, he was elected to the People's Assembly because the Muslim Brotherhood, an Islamist organization, was formally banned in Egypt. He held the seat as an independent, and during that time, Morsi pressed the government to enact political reform, calling for the lifting of repressive measures, including the emergency law, which granted the police unlimited powers of arrest and detention, and laws limiting the formation of political parties. He also established himself as a social conservative, calling for the government to place tighter restrictions on entertainment that he considered indecent. Morsi lost his seat in 2005 when the administration of President Hosni Mubarak used electoral fraud to reverse the gains made by the Muslim Brotherhood in 2000. Morsi was subsequently appointed to the Muslim Brotherhood's Guidance Bureau, the organization's highest executive body, and in 2006 he was arrested and imprisoned for 7 months for participating in protests calling for the establishment of an independent judiciary in Egypt. He was also arrested during protests in January 2011 that forced Mubarak to step down as president. Hosni's ouster cleared the way for the Muslim Brotherhood to participate openly in Egyptian politics, and to that end, the group formed the Freedom and Justice Party. In April 2012, the party selected Morsi to be its candidate in Egypt's presidential election after Kairat al-Shatta, the party's original candidate, was disqualified from running. Morsi won the largest total in the first round of voting in May and defeated Ahmed Shafiq, a former prime minister under Mubarak, in a runoff held on June 16th and 17th. Morsi prepared to take on office during a period of political uncertainty, and the dissolution of Muslim Brotherhood led People's Assembly by the Egyptian Supreme Constitutional Court on June 14th and the interim military government surprise constitutional declaration on June 17th, which stripped the presidency of much of its authority, raised new questions about the interim government's willingness to cede power to elected officials, and on June 30th, Morsi was sworn in as president. Although Morsi began his presidency in a state of apparent subordination to the interim military government of the Supreme Council of the Armed Forces, he moved to take the upper hand in August, announcing the retirement of several senior members of the council and revoking the constitutional declaration on June 17th. Morsi's first major foreign policy success came in November 2012 when he jeered international praise for helping to break a ceasefire in a week-long conflict between Israel and Hamas in the Gaza Strip. And on November 22nd, the day after the ceasefire took effect, Morsi moved to address his often contentious relations with Egypt's judiciary by issuing an edict declaring that his authority as president would not be subject to any form of judicial oversight until a permanent constitution came into effect. The decree also removed the court's power to dissolve the Constituent Assembly, a 100-member body responsible for drafting a new constitution, and opened the way for retrial of officials implicated in violence against protesters during the uprising against Mubarak. Although Morsi defended the edict as a necessary measure to protect Egypt's transition to democracy, mass demonstrations were held against what many saw as a seizure to dictatorial powers. On November 30th, the Constituent Assembly approved a drafted constitution written by Islamists without input of boycotting Christians and secularist members. Morsi called for a referendum on the draft to be held on December 15th, and both opponents and supporters of Morsi staged allies around the country, resulting in some of the longest demonstrations since 2011. Crowds demanding Morsi's ouster gathered at the presidential palace and ransacked several Muslim Brotherhood offices as protests continued in early December. Morsi bowed to public anger and rescinded parts of his constitutional decree, but retained the article preventing the courts from dissolving the Constituent Assembly. He declared martial law on December 9th, authorizing the military to make arrests and keep order until the constitutional referendum could be held. The drafted constitution was approved by voters and took effect in late December. Worsening economic conditions, deteriorating public services, and a string of sectarian incidents exacerbated political polarization and strengthened opposition to Morsi's rule. Clashes between Morsi's supporters and critics in late June 2013 culminated in a massive anti-Morsi protests around the country on June 30th, the first anniversary of his inauguration. On July 1st, the head of Egyptian Armed Forces, General Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, issued an ultimatum declaring that the military was ready to intervene to prevent chaos in the country if Morsi was unable to placate the protesters. Morsi responded to the protesters by offering negotiations with the opposition but refused to step down. And on July 3rd, the military made a good on its ultimatum, suspending the constitution, removing Morsi from the presidency. Morsi was then placed under arrest along with several other Muslim Brotherhood leaders. The month that followed saw supporters of Morsi and the Muslim Brotherhood driven back underground in Egypt. In late July and August, the security forces violently suppressed demonstrations against Morsi's removal, killing more than 1,000 protesters, and the Muslim Brotherhood was formally outlawed in September. Al-Sisi, who had led the muster of Morsi, left the military to run for presidency and was elected in 2014. Morsi faced separate trials for a variety of offenses, including having incited Muslim Brotherhood supporters to kill demonstrators who staged an anti-Morsi protest in 2012 and having colluded with foreign groups such as Hamas, Hezbollah, and Iran's Revolutionary Guards. And in his statements in court, Morsi refused to recognize the legitimacy of the proceedings against him and insisted that he remained president of Egypt. In April 2015, he was sentenced to 20 years in prison for inciting violence against protesters, and a month later, he was sentenced to death for his alleged role in acts of violence committed during a mass prison break that took place in January 2011 during the uprising against Mubarak. In June 2015, he was also sentenced to life imprisonment for conspiring with foreign military groups to commit acts of terrorism. In 2016, an Egyptian court overturned Morsi's death and life sentence against him for conspiring with foreign groups and ordered a retrial. Morsi remained in prison while the new retrial was underway. Prison conditions were harsh, and he was denied adequate medical attention. And on June 17, 2019, he collapsed while in court and he was pronounced dead shortly after. The Great One of God asked the congregation to mark the word collapse.
Collapse.
And it came to pass when Mohammad Morsi collapsed during a court session and was pronounced dead shortly after. May his soul rest in eternal peace.